Male Void recently did a video destroying the right-wing philosophical worldview. The video is called "Conservatives Are Morons, Nature is Not a Meritocracy." The video is very good and I recommend that you check it out. Let's listen to the last 5 minutes of his video, as someone left a comment on it, and I want to provide context for this person's comment.
There's no group of men that deserve female mates more than any other group of men. Mate guarding is just as imperfect as any other evolutionary process. Cheating is found throughout the animal kingdom, and as I've said before, the dominance hierarchy that determines which males have the most access to resources and females is highly dynamic anyway. Trying to keep traditional marriage alive, either for social stability or the genetic benefit of the human race, is ultimately unproductive. Traditional marriage served a social function in our pre-industrial past, but it is now all but useless. Arguing that traditionalism or traditional marriage is natural is even more bogus, as the monogamous marriage we know of today only came into existence in early medieval Europe. Marriage, in any sense, was unknown to our Paleolithic tribal ancestors, who didn't even have property to hand down and who didn't even know who their children were. Traditionalism is neither natural nor is it meritocratic. Nature itself isn't a meritocracy. The irony of TradCon's calling feminism Marxist collectivism is that traditionalism itself was highly collectivist and only existed with laws and social sanctions. There was nothing natural or individualistic about it. Traditionalism only existed as a means of enabling our survival in an agricultural, political, economic environment. It was a highly complex social system not found anywhere else in the animal kingdom. It didn't have any inherent merit or virtue. It was just a means of survival. Industrial capitalism provided men and women alike with more options and removed the necessity of rigid gender roles. Many will argue that traditionalism provided men and women with purpose and moral boundaries. The bottom line is life is fundamentally amoral and without purpose. The universe does not care whether we as a species go extinct. Humans have always created their own morality and purpose as a means for their group survival. It never came from anywhere outside of us. Even the concept of our rights came about as a means to provide social stability and incentives so as to benefit the group. It never came from the heavens or nature. It came from some collective consensus and agreement. Where we go from here is another question. Just because traditionalism worked in the past doesn't mean it will continue to work under our current conditions of modern industrial capitalism. More to the point, it wasn't natural, it wasn't virtuous, and it wasn't meritocratic, and it certainly wasn't pro-male. Capitalism tore apart the social structure of traditionalism. Capitalism didn't create misandry or gynocentrism, but it amplified it. It abolished the necessity of the sexes to depend on each other for survival, and it replaced it with desire, which placed men at a great disadvantage. Simply put, women do not desire men in the same way that men desire women. Traditionalism is dead, and there's no going back. All we as men can do is look forward with the interests of men in mind. Society as a collective already has and always has had women's interests in mind. What men need to do is to make sure that the collective looks out just as much for men. And when and where it doesn't, men must act act collectively and decisively to make sure that it does. Male collectivism is the only solution.
This is the last 5 minutes of the truly excellent video Male Void did. Anyway, a YouTuber called Male Chauvinistic Pig left this comment on Male Void's video.
You sound like you are advocating for communism. If that is the case, please visit Venezuela or North Korea.
What Male Void said in his video sounds nothing like the advocacy of communism in any sense of the word whatsoever. All special interest groups in society take collective action, inducing corporations and lobby groups who advocate for laissez-faire economics. I suppose since the fact that corporations lobby and act collectively, that must make them raging Marxists. I suppose every single form of collectivism is Marxism. Does that make any collective rules that society lays down Marxist? Using that broad definition, even a fictional and capitalist utopia would be classed as Marxist. All forms of human organization are based on collectivism. So calling for men to organize in their own self-interest is not communism. Collectivism is a commonality among all human civilizations that have ever existed. So pointing to it and calling it communist is completely and utterly meaningless. Male Chauvinistic Pig finishes equals off comment telling Male Sentient Void to visit Venezuela or North Korea. What those two countries have to do with Male Void's video, I have no idea. This is the standard right-wing thought-terminating cliché. If a right-wing person dislikes what you say, he will bring up the subject of communism out of the blue. I have watched quite a few of Male Pig's videos, and while he seems misguided on a lot of things, he is not an idiot, so I really can't give him a pass due to ignorance. I honestly think he is intentionally using thought-terminating clichés to try and shut the conversation down. I can only conclude that MCP hates the idea of men working together to improve their lot. In fact, Male Chauvinistic Pig is being disrespectful and dishonest in his post. He is using a feminist-like debating tactic. He is poisoning the well of the debate. When a feminist dislikes what someone is talking about in a debate, they will often randomly bring up rape culture, to poison and derail the conversation. It doesn't matter if the subject at hand has nothing to do with rape, it will not stop the nutty feminist from bringing it up. Feminists know there are very strong negative connotations with rape. Other nutty left-wing types will do the same thing, often replacing talk of rape with random accusations of racism. What Male Chauvinistic Pig is doing is exactly the same tactic here, just using communism instead of rape as an excuse not to engage in the discourse, and try and derail. MCP post is short, and fairly pointless. It is just a lame attempt to derail the conversation. What I got to ask is this: what is the motive of right-wing men who do this? Women have all the collectivism they need. They are more organized than men and protect their interests far better. I am sorry, but men need to take collective action. The more well-organized rule, the less well-organized. If right-wing men think collective organization is communism and therefore evil, they have no right to then complain about the inevitable results of men refusing to work together. Men getting shit on and walked all over is because they lack affinity with each other, and only care about their relationships with women. Men are happy to die in wars, and get treated like shit in general, only as long as they are able to bribe women into relationships. It seems to me right-wingers just want to bitch and moan about women, and that is it. Right-wing men go out of their way to cock-block the men who talk about solutions to the problems men face. I think most MGTOW men dislike other men, and can't stand the thought of other men improving their lot, or getting help. Most MGTOW men are just resent-filled. This is one of the reasons why I dropped the MGTOW label. I have seen so many MGTOW falsely accuse other men of being communists to straw-man them in conversations, therefore I have to go conclude that many MGTOW want other men to remain atomized and helpless. This is the typical right-wing worldview. It is a cock-blocking mindset, and is anti-male. MGTOW is a reactive passive right-wing movement, a movement that encourages and endorses male complacency, and therefore encourages collective male powerlessness and failure. I want to state this as clear as I can. The right is anti-male, and you can't be pro-male and right-wing. The right-wing is complete garbage and only holds men back. I completely and utterly reject the right-wing, and objectively the left is far superior to the right. While the left is largely toxic and anti-male, at least the left has workable ideas that can work in reality. Because the left acknowledges the reality of human power and human organization. Human beings are collectivists, and civilization is based on humans collectively building up infrastructure and institutions that have improved people's lives. History has repeatedly shown that groups that refuse to work together in their own self-interest get crushed and stepped on, and end up in the dustbin of history. Oh no, I quoted Trotsky, that must make me a raging leftist, cultural Marxist, collectivist. Right-wing thought is a complete fucking mess on so many levels. You have right-wingers who support free market capitalism, then they whine and complain about the results of capitalism. They invent wonky conspiracy theories to explain away the results of capitalism they do not approve of. For example, capitalism leads to shitty lowbrow culture. I have seen right-wingers blame trashy TV shows and rap music on cultural Marxism when in fact trashy culture sells in a free market. You have right-wingers who talk about natural hierarchy and social Darwinism one moment, then talk about the West declining due to the lack of Christianity the next moment. The social Darwinist worldview is in complete opposition to Christian values. When someone contradicts themselves all the time, you know they are irrational and operating on an emotional level. Then these same idiots will then talk about cultural Marxists or Jews manipulating society from behind the scenes to take power, and complain about how unfair that is. Hang on, I didn't realize that natural selection was about fair play? You are either for ruthless dog-eat-dog competition, or you are not. You have to pick one. You can't advocate for a callous worldview one moment, then complain about a group being ruthless and not playing fair the next. If you are a social Darwinist and believe in conspiracy theories, you have to conclude that the groups who conspire and gain power fully deserve the power they gain, and in fact deserve to rule over you, and that you are weak and deserve to be ruled over. Social Darwinism is just pseudo-scientific bullshit, and is often used as a post hoc rationalization to advocate the withholding of help for other people in need. Then these same people will expect you to be outraged when people like them get mistreated. They often make appeals to their social conformity, their playing by the rules, as a reason why their mistreatment is so unfair. A truly social Darwinist society wouldn't care if people conforms to its norms or not. It would enable those people to get crushed and discarded just as much as someone who didn't conform. Social conformity is often a survival strategy of the weak, while the strong have less social restraints placed on their behavior. Also, the right love to bang on about slave morality, and mock others for having a slave morality when they complain about things, even if that person have complaints that are justified. Well, I am sorry, but trying to make your cowardly social conformity a virtue, and a grounds for others to care about you, matches your own definition of slave morality. Why should we give a shit about you, if you do not give a shit about others? Right-wing thought is a disgusting, antisocial, vindictive, resent-filled, cowardly, slave-minded mess. I am not going to pretend the left and right are just as bad as each other, to try and appear balanced, because it is simply not true. The right is completely worthless and toxic, and too many right-wingers are just bad people. The left in theory could at least be reformed, and their ideas used in the real world. The right-wing politicians who succeed in the real world, they often contradict their own platitudes about individualism and free markets, and use state collectivism to further their own ends. Anyone who takes empty platitudes about individualism and the free market seriously will never get anything done in the real world. A recent example of this is the lawsuit against Google that Purdue University has filed for censorship. Apparently Purdue has had their videos restricted by Google. Yet let's look at a Purdue video about free markets.
The United States is the world's most prosperous economy. It's been that way for so long, over 100 years, that we take it for granted. But how did it happen? There are many answers, of course. One is that the United States values the free market over government control of the economy. But here's a point that is seldom made. It didn't begin that way. Before the country placed its trust in the free market, it trusted the government to make important business decisions. Or to put it another way, only after the government failed repeatedly to promote economic growth, and only after private enterprise succeeded where the government failed, did the United States start to develop a world-beating economy. Let's look at 3 telling examples. In 1808, John Jacob Astor formed the American Fur Company and marketed American furs around the world. Europeans adored beaver hats for their peerless warmth and durability. Astor gave them what they wanted. Instead of leaving the fur business to capable entrepreneurs like Astor, the government decided it wanted to be in on the action. So it subsidized its own fur company run by a self-promoting government official named Thomas McKinney. McKinney should have won the competition. After all, he had the federal government backing him. But while Astor employed hundreds of people and still made a tidy profit, McKinney's company lost money every year. Finally, Congress, in 1822, came to its senses and ended the subsidies for McKinney and his associates. A similar situation developed in the 1840s around the telegraph. The telegraph was the first step toward the instant communication we have today. Invented by Samuel Morse, the telegraph transmitted sound as dots and dashes representing letters of the alphabet. Morse, more of an idealist than a businessman, agreed to let the government own and operate the telegraph in the national interest. But the government steadily lost money each month it operated the telegraph. During 1845, expenditures for the telegraph exceeded revenue by 6 to 1 and sometimes by 10 to 1. Seeing no value in the invention, Congress turned the money loser over to private enterprise. In the hands of entrepreneurs, the business took off. Telegraph promoters showed the press how it could instantly report stories occurring hundreds of miles away. Bankers, stockbrokers, and insurance companies saw how they could instantly monitor investments near and far. As the quality of service improved, telegraph lines were strung across the country, from 40 miles of wire in 1846 to 23,000 miles in 1852. By the 1860s, the U.S. had a transcontinental telegraph wire. And by the end of that decade, entrepreneurs had strung a telegraph cable across the Atlantic Ocean. Why didn't the U.S. government profitably use what Morse had invented? Part of the answer is that the incentives for bureaucrats differ sharply from those of entrepreneurs. When government operated the telegraph, Washington bureaucrats received no profits from the messages they sent, and the cash they lost was the taxpayers', not their own. So government officials had no incentive to improve service, to find new customers, or to expand to more cities. But entrepreneurs like Ezra Cornell, the founder of Western Union, did. Cheaper, better service meant more customers and more profits. Just 15 years after Congress privatized the telegraph, both the costs of construction and the rates for service linking the major cities were as little as 1/10 of the original rates established by Washington. In the steamship business, we see the story repeated yet again. During the 1840s, regular steamship travel began between New York and England. The government placed its bets on shipowner Edward Collins, a man more skilled at political lobbying than at business. While Congress funded Collins, Cornelius Vanderbilt started his own steamship company. Vanderbilt cut the costs of travel, filled his ships with eager passengers, and built a fabulously successful business, soon leaving Collins in his wake. Collins failed because he didn't feel a need to improve or even provide safe and regular service. For example, 2 of his 4 ships sank, killing hundreds of passengers. If he lost money, there was always another politician to appeal to. Vanderbilt, in contrast, had to serve his customers, or he would have lost his company. You'd think we would have learned our lesson by now. Economic prosperity comes from free enterprise, not from government subsidies. But it's a lesson we have to learn every generation. I'm Burton Folsom, professor of history at Hillsdale College for Prager University.
This video is utter nonsense, and ignores the fact that the U.S. economy policy was based on tariffs and protection of its markets. The U.S. only really changed its policy after the Second World War, when all other major industrial powers were either destroyed or greatly declined. The point I am trying to make is that right-wingers with power and influence do not even believe their own bullshit. The only right-wingers who believe that free market ideology works are the useful idiots. So if right-wingers do not believe their own nonsense about individualism and free enterprise, then them trying to convince other people is them trying to convince them to be powerless, and not to advocate for their own self-interest. Prager is trying to use the state and the collectivist legal system to sue Google.
I run an educational media company. We produce 5-minute videos about different topics we believe that the world should be aware of. We produce videos about history, political science, just anything that we believe would make a person whole and more knowledgeable and savvy in this world.
Prager uses 60% of their audience is under 35. About 35 PragerU videos are currently restricted.
When we first realized that our videos were being restricted, there were about 15 videos that were restricted, and that was a year and a half ago. And since then, not only has the issue not been resolved, there's actually been 20 more videos restricted, and currently it's closer to 40 videos that are being restricted. And after nothing really happening for weeks and weeks, we kept pressing them, and then they eventually told us, well, after reviewing your videos, we determined they're not appropriate for a young audience, which was really troubling to us at PragerU, because if you've seen any of our videos, they're very educational and they're very appropriate for a young audience.
They have placed our videos on their restricted list. That means that it can't be viewed in libraries, in schools, or any home that filters out pornography, for example. Cannot be seen in any of those places. Our videos are as innocent as exists on the internet. or Pulitzer Prize winners, professors from Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Yale, and they still said inappropriate, but we still don't understand why.
You think when you Google something, everything on that subject comes up. I mean, it's in their mission statement. They say we organize the information of the world and make it universally accessible to all. They don't do that because they don't make ours accessible.
When I learned YouTube had been denying access to its platform to PragerU's videos, I said, I think the only way you're going to get honest answers and gain the access that the First Amendment would require is if, in fact, you start getting people through discovery in a lawsuit.
I almost feel like we're being bullied because being silenced is such a frustrating feeling. This is not just about PragerU being silenced. This is about another point of view that is being silenced. Tomorrow it's going to be your point of view that's being silenced.
Is Google the one who gets to decide what everybody gets to watch?
I thought right-wingers believed in property rights. Why don't corporations have the right to ban and block people on their property? Why isn't PragerU waiting for the free market to magically fix things? It is because they know their free market propaganda is nonsense. In general, right-wing politics is just so reactive and useless. The only thing right-wing politicians seem able to do is place restrictions on men and punish them. Right-wingers are unable to do the same to women, of course, so right-wingers just tend to double down on their punishment and control of men. Right-wingers whine about Marxists all the time. They use them as their bogeyman scapegoat. They will call pro-male men Marxists, or bring up Marxism to derail the conversation. A lot of it is bullying as well, as communism has a lot of negative connotations associated with it. So these right-wing men are trying to shut the conversation down and deter men from seeking solutions. Sounds exactly like a feminist bringing up rape culture, when men's rights activists try talking about their issues. Right-wingers have their own form of political correctness, and their own subjects that are taboo. They try and use groupthink and shaming tactics to try and get people to conform to their worldview. I have had enough of right-wing men. They are whining cowards, and I am not going to let them cock-block me. I am a proud male collectivist. Men have to make a choice. They can either be pro-male, or they can be right-wing. They can't be both. I will now consider all right-wingers the enemy of men.